Academy basketball teams are playing in a tournament down in Valley. And so if you have kids in junior, and senior high in the Academy, make sure you get the schedule from them. Something different this weekend for Sunday school, the ladies will meet in here, and the men will meet in the cafeteria. That's teenagers and up. And we have a missionary, Audrey Henderson, that will be here. And so she's going to speak to the ladies here in the auditorium. And then the men will actually be doing a study on qualifications of deacons downstairs. And so I think it'll be an interesting study for both. Monday, no Academy classes for Lee, Jackson, Martin Luther King, just whoever day you want it to be. So we don't have school for that. And then Monday night, they did start men's basketball back. I didn't realize that. Has anybody in here played? Nobody's? Mike, you haven't been out there to? Not recently. Okay, yeah, I didn't realize they started that. And so they have jumped back into that. So Jesse?
I'll be there.
Yeah, okay, you'll be there. Yeah, I'll be there with you. Tuesday night, Academy has a basketball game versus Faith here. And then next Wednesday night, the Proverbs, tonight it's for men and husbands, and next week it'll be for women and wives. And so we're targeting specifically those things. All right, so how many of you can fill in the blanks here? All right, a good number of you. Okay. All right, so let's see. I didn't pay attention to who raised their hand. So Mike, leadership is... Jim, leadership is influence. Yep. And good leadership is good influence. Yeah, leadership is influence. That's just the definition of leadership. That's all you are. You're an influencer, and you don't have to have a position to be an influencer. And if you think about life, you'll realize that is very true. You do not have to have a title to be an influencer. So you're a leader whether you have a title or not. And then love, what's that? Whether you want to or not. Yeah, she's been in enough studies to know, yeah, you are going to be a leader, whether you want to be a leader or not, because everybody influences people. So, all right, so Jen Brand, love is... Very good. A selfless commitment to another's highest good. And that is agape love, the highest form of love, a selfless commitment to another's highest good. And that's the kind of love the Lord Jesus Christ had for us when He died on the cross. And that's the kind of love He calls us to have, a selfless commitment to another's highest good. All right? So you got that? So say the second one with me. Love is a selfless commitment to another's highest good. All right? It'll keep coming up, so hopefully you'll learn it sometime through the year. Okay, we're going to switch PowerPoints, and let's go to Proverbs 1. Any announcements or anything going on that I'm missing? Bill? Yes, Second Amendment, right.
Winchester City Council did not. And I don't know, since I work for a newspaper, I get certain things that other people don't get. But there's a congressman in Virginia, and I'm not going to name his name, but his comment was that Governor Northam should use the Virginia National Guard to enforce the gun rights laws that they're trying to pass now. And I thought to myself, I've never seen it before where the military would be used against its own citizens,
right,
against an amendment that's already in our federal constitution.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
It's an interesting play on things that are happening.
Right.
That unless you read about what is going on, this is very important because, you know, we years ago passed an amendment that gives people certain rights, and if you're able to use your military to without legislation, and that's what we are. We're a republic, not a democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Where legislators vote on things, not where you call the
right.
National Guard to enforce, against your own citizens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And once you take away one of those constitutional amendments, the others are in jeopardy as well.
Here's another thing. I don't know if people realize that in order to purchase an automatic weapon, first of all, there's not that many around, and they're very, very expensive. You would have to be a collector, would have to get them.
Mhm.
My son-in-law's in the military, and and he's a big gun collector. And I was talking to him the other night about it, and he said that basically, you know, in order to get an automatic weapon, it costs between $10,000 and $30,000.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of people that are going to even have access to
Yeah.
automatic weapons. These things that these people are talking about, people can't even get a hold of them.
Right.
Because they outlawed them, I think, in 1965
Yeah.
or something.
Right.
So they're basically collector items that people could get a hold of these
Yeah.
automatic weapons.
Yeah, the terminology is all mixed up on that side of the aisle. So anybody who works with guns would recognize, you know, and you've probably seen assault rifle. They're talking about what it looks like, not what it actually is. You can make a BB gun look like an assault rifle.
I think we should consider electing Bill.
I am definitely open for that. When you retire, we should put you, city council.
I'm not really good at talking to people.
Right, you just talked. See, I've told Joe Crane that he needs to run for office, and he hasn't agreed to do that yet either. And
Another
so,
man that wasn't really good at talking with people. His name was Moses. And
yeah, that is good point. Yeah, it worked out well. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm looking for some people to run for office here.
Hey, one more thing.
Yeah.
The Washington Examiner, there was an editorial that this editorial person wanted to basically have Dave Ramsey run for president. And
There you go.
Dave Ramsey got, I listened to his podcast the
Yeah.
other day, and he was talking about he wouldn't want that job for anything else.
Yeah, I think you have to have an ego as big as Trump's to really want that, you know. And you know, and I'm happy with how he's doing the job, but you know, he is fit for it. That's just they fit each other. So so far, of course, with that hair that he has, you know, with most presidents after a few years, you ever see the pictures when they go in and when they come out? Yeah, the age. Yeah, to me, he doesn't look like he's suffered under that yet. But I'm not. Yeah. So yeah. So anyway. You know, another thing I saw in the newspaper that kind of made me laugh was one of the legislators in West Virginia has offered Frederick County the option to join West Virginia. To become a West Virginian. So when I first saw it, I was really excited, and then I thought, wait, I'm Clark County. Yeah. I know. Yeah. Yeah. Jim?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I read a very brief article. It sounds like Frederick County never voted back in 1863. That's why they were still given that opportunity.
Yeah.
I guess.
That's right. Yeah, that's what they said. It's the option is still there from long, long ago. Yeah. That would be an interesting move. I don't know if I've ever heard of a county moving state to state. Might have happened, though. That'd be a good Jeopardy question. Yeah. Did you guys watch the greatest of all time Jeopardy thing? Yeah. That was fun to watch. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I didn't know a lot of the answers, but it was fun to watch. Yeah. All right, any other big announcements? Grace, any big announcements in life, you know, before you go back to studying? And yeah, just, okay. All right. Amber.
I quit one of my jobs.
You did? Which one? Is that the one that's the weekend one?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's good. You needed to. Yeah. All right. Good. Okay. All right. Yes.
I signed a contract with my house right before I left for church.
Did you really? Great.
But we need to pray that this one goes
That
through.
it goes through. Okay.
Not the first contract.
Yeah. They've been paying 2 house payments for several months.
Yes.
And so her tithe will go way up, you know, once this contract goes.
Slapped them.
Good.
That's why I've been able to make a mortgage payment.
Good. Anything else? This is good information here. Mike?
Side note, the football national championship, which was Monday night.
Yes.
LSU. Hold on, stick with me. The artist that sang the national anthem, her name was Lauren Daigle, and
Yeah.
she is actually a very well-known Christian worship artist, which is unusual
Huh.
for something as
Yeah.
secular as a football game.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Trump loves it.
I was going to say, did you see President Trump and Melania come out? That was really cool. I mean, and they attacked him, but I mean, you have to admit, whoever even if it was Obama and Michelle, that was classy. That was just really sharp what they did, and showed a lot of respect. So I enjoyed that. So, okay, Proverbs. So we are. We need to lay a little bit of groundwork. I know Pastor Roger spoke last week, and he told me a little bit about what he did at the beginning, but I was at the music conference last week, so I appreciate him doing that. But I wanted to just take Proverbs on Wednesday nights for 4 weeks, and actually the 4th week, Todd Channel will be doing it. So these will all come from the book of Proverbs, but on 4 specific subjects. And tonight, it's for men and husbands. And we're going to throw a lot of information out. But it's all going to be under 3 or 4 topics, just things that the Proverbs says. But before we do that, we need to make sure that we understand Proverbs itself. And so let me ask you a question. First question is, who wrote Proverbs? All right. Primarily Solomon. There are a few other writers, and we don't know for sure who some of those were that wrote a couple of chapters. They may actually be kind of pen names for Solomon. We don't know. But yeah, when you say who wrote Proverbs, you're pretty safe to say Solomon. And Solomon was the 3rd king of Israel. So who was the first king? Saul. Second king? David, and then Solomon. And who was Solomon's mother? Bathsheba. Yeah, so you've got David and Bathsheba, and Solomon is their second son. And so you know the story behind that there was an immoral relationship that was founded on him. Of course, David had several wives. And so Solomon grew up in the king's family, but he seemed to have weathered that well. And in his maturity, in his more mature years, he asked for wisdom rather than the life of his enemies and money and long life. And he said, Lord, I just want wisdom. I want to know what the right thing to do would be. And God blessed him with all those other things as well. And so at some point in that wisdom, he began to write down things that have been preserved in the Scripture. And so we benefit from that. Now, it wouldn't be fair to say that Proverbs is only written to, but who is Proverbs primarily written to? Andy?
His children.
Yeah, his children. And specifically his sons. I have studied Solomon extensively. That's been one of my the things that I started even as a teenager. I was really kind of enamored with this whole process. I even had a dog named Solomon once. He was black, and Song of Solomon says, I'm black but comely. So I thought, well, that's a good dog's name then. So I studied the Proverbs a lot. I've read it a lot and studied it. And in my mind, I think he's looking at his sons and he's saying, these young men are going to take over when I die. And I want them to be prepared when they take over. And so I'm going to write some things down for them. It's a manual for young men. If I could get young men to study any book, it would be Proverbs. To say, I need to learn how to be the kind of man that would honor God. All right, study Proverbs. And even an older man, I still read Proverbs regularly. And I think there are a couple of people now here and on our staff that not every time, but when a month has 31 days, you read 1 chapter a day. Does anybody do that in here? Read Proverbs? Yeah, if a month has 31 days or 31 chapters in Proverbs, you can read a proverb a day. So Proverbs is written primarily to his sons. I want you to see verses 1 through 7. And I'm going to put it on the screen tonight. If you have it in front of you in the King James, you'll see that there are some differences in wording, but I want you to see exactly what he says to start with, why he's writing Proverbs. And so I'm going to go through this on the screen first because I do need to keep moving here. There's so much information that I will never get through it if I don't move quickly on some of this. But think of the first 8 verses, Proverbs 1 through 8. And he begins by saying, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. So he identifies himself. He's in this position as king. Now, here's what he says about what he's writing. To know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding, to receive instruction in wise behavior, righteousness, judgment, or justice, and equity, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth, knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. Now just stop there for a second on those first 5 verses. He is clearly saying, I'm writing this because I want to help a person who reads this go from naivete, where he's just deceived and he's tricked and he just doesn't really think about what he's getting into, to a person who has knowledge and discretion, that he is going to increase learning. He's going to acquire wise counsel. And that tells us something. You have to determine to acquire this. You have to set out to get it. You will pick up some things accidentally, but if you set out to get it, you're going to find it. Verse 6, he goes on and he says, to understand a proverb and a figure. That's the idea of a figure of speech, or the way someone says something. The words of the wise and their riddles. And then here is the probably the key verse, the theme verse. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. A little bit later in chapter 9, he'll say, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So if you want to have knowledge and you want to have wisdom, it starts with understanding who God is. That is actually a premise for what we teach in our youth group, in our school, with our young people all the way around. We want them to understand who God is, and at that point you'll have wisdom and knowledge. You don't really have it until you understand who God is. Go on to verse, or finish that verse. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Fools just, they don't want to hear wisdom. They don't want to be instructed. And there's the contrast that's going to take place throughout the book of Proverbs. The knowledgeable, the wise person, as opposed to the fool. And then I added verse 8. Originally I had just verses 1 through 7. But verse 8 is where he begins then to get into the meat of what he's going to say. This verse will come up again in a little bit on another slide. Hear, my son, your father's instructions, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. So here is where he really gets into what he's saying. I'm talking to my son. Sons in plural, but he said, guys, listen to what I'm telling you. And when your mother teaches you something, don't forsake it. He was determined to get information out to them. And so you've got Solomon saying, here's information for men. Here's information for young men, but it's information that follows you through all of your life. You need to grasp what I'm saying in Proverbs. Here are a couple of notes about Proverbs. I know that Pastor Rogers told me he mentioned this last week, but are Proverbs promises? Give me a yay or nay on that. Is a proverb a promise? Andy? No, it's not. People get in trouble when they make a proverb a promise. Sometimes people misinterpret a proverb anyway, and then they really get in trouble when they misinterpret it and then they claim it as a promise. And Proverbs are not promises. Let me explain what that means. Somebody said Proverbs are tight kernels of truth that seem difficult to crack. It's a kernel of truth. It's like a popcorn kernel, and I've got to get inside it to see what's actually in there. Somebody else said they're short sentences drawn from long experience. So here's somebody that has a wealth of experience, and they've culled this down to just a short sentence so that you can learn from it. The culture is very important in interpreting a proverb. And that's one of the things that makes this book a little more difficult, is you have to think back in Solomon's day as to how things would be done. You know, he obviously didn't have iPads and didn't have phones and didn't have automobiles. And so you have to think in the time when you had an agrarian society. They were raising crops and they were riding horses and mules, and things were done at a much slower pace. And so as you interpret the proverb, you have to interpret it in the light of its culture. Are proverbs always true? This is a tricky question. Are proverbs always true? Let's get an example of that. Is somebody close enough to Proverbs 10:4 that you could read it for me? Can somebody find that one? Proverbs 10, verse 4. Who's got it? All right, Carol?
He becometh poor that dealeth with a slack hand, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich.
All right. He becomes poor that deals with a slack hand. A slack hand is, he doesn't put any diligence into it. But he becomes rich. How's the end of that go?
But the hand of the diligent maketh rich.
Yeah, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich. Now, is it always true that a diligent person is rich and somebody who is lazy is poor? Mike?
No, but that's not the point. The point isn't that you're going to get money or not have money. The point is that trying to tell you to be diligent while you're dealing.
Okay. Your answer is correct. So does that mean this proverb is not true?
Not in the literal sense. But it's not a lie either.
So you're saying the Bible's wrong?
No, I'm saying you have to keep it in intended context.
There you go. Okay, you have to understand what a proverb is. A proverb is not a promise. And so you don't take a proverb and say, God promised if I was diligent that I would be made fat. And by fat, he doesn't mean fat physically. He means that I would have wealth. And so if I'm diligent, I will have everything that I want. Well, sometimes that doesn't work out. Because we have to realize this is a generalization. And this is something that's generally true, other things being equal. These are observations about life. They are actually kernels of truth about life. And so if I'm just watching life in general, this is how it will be. If I am diligent, do I have a far, far better chance of being wealthy, well taken care of, than if I deal with a slack hand? Absolutely. Yeah. So this is a generalization about life. A proverb is a truth that I need to know. Other things being equal, if I am going to be diligent, the hand of the diligent shall be made fat. Somebody who's diligent is probably going to be far, far better off. We might even say 99% of the time he's going to be far better off than the person who deals with a slack hand. But it's not a promise. It's an observation about life. It's a generalization that I need to understand. It's a slice of reality. It's true, but it's a segment of life, and life is complex. And so with the complexities of life, then sometimes this generalization is going to go the other way. But in general, these are the observations. And sometimes he is going to give us actual premises that are built upon biblical law or biblical truth. And those things are always true. And so when it's a proverb, something like Proverbs 10:4, where he says, if you're diligent, you're probably going to be made fat. If you deal with a slack hand, you're going to be poor. That's generally true. There could be exceptions, but generally that's going to be the case. All right, so let's go to the first of a couple of things in Proverbs that he really focuses some attention on, dealing with husbands and wives. And here's the first one. He spends a lot of time in the first 6 chapters talking about a man being faithful to his wife, and he's talking about faithful physically in the marriage. So Proverbs 5 and 6. Let's turn over to Proverbs 5. Proverbs 5. And can I get a volunteer to read verses 1 through 6? How about one of the men here? Chipper?
My son, attend to my wisdom, and bow thine ear to thine understanding. And thou mayest regard discretion, and that thou lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of a strange woman droppeth honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But her aim is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps take hold of hell. Lest thou shouldest ponder the path of life, her ways are ruled, and thou canst not know them.
Yeah, here he says, let me talk to you very straightforward in chapters 5 and 6 about the lips of a strange woman. Now, what does he mean by a strange woman? You'll notice that in the New American Standard, if you go down to verse 3, he says, for the lips of an adulteress drip honey, and smoother than oil is her speech. In other words, her kisses are sweet, and her words just flow, and it's smoother than oil. And then as he goes on, he says, but you've got to look down the road. This is the wisdom. In the end, she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. So he said, you're going to start thinking, man, this is wonderful. And then in the end, it's going to be bitter and it's going to slice you both ways. And so at that point, he comes to verse 5 and he says, drink water from your own cistern, and fresh water from your own well. You need to be faithful in your marriage. You need to be enjoying your own marriage. But you should not be on a path. She does not ponder the path of life. Her ways are unstable and does not know it. She's going to drag you along, and you're going to find yourself in instability in that. Go down to the end of it. Verses 15 through 23. The whole chapter is well worth reading, but let's go to the end of it. Let me get another volunteer. Verses 15 through verse 23. Let's see. Bill, do you have it? Okay.
Drink waters out of thine own cistern, and running waters out of thine own well. Let thy fountains be dispersed abroad, and rivers of waters in the streets. Let there be only thine own, and not strangers with thee. Let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let her be as a loving hind and a pleasant roe. Let her breast satisfy thee at all times, and be thou ravished always with her love. And why wilt thou, my son, be ravished with a strange woman, and embrace the bosom of a stranger? For the ways of a man are before the Lord, and he ponders always goes. His own iniquity shall take the wicked himself, and he shall be holden with the cords of his sins. He shall die without instruction, and in the greatness of his folly he shall go astray.
When you look at this passage, I think I have a verse out of place in there somewhere, don't I? 5, yeah. That should be 15. I don't know how that happened. Huh. Well, maybe you needed to see that twice. I don't know. Verse 15, drink water from your own cistern and fresh water from your own well. And he goes on and he says, you should be, he's emphasizing faithfulness here. Let them be yours only, not strangers with you. There's a monogamous relationship. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice with the wife of your youth. Do you know how that gets switched to emphasize rejoice with the wife of your youth, not the... You don't know that one? You rejoice with the wife of your youth, not the youth of your wife. Yeah, because that's what happens with some men. She's not as young as she used to be, so I want a new one. No, it's the wife of your youth that you rejoice with. And then he speaks almost, not graphically here, but he's very blunt. He says, as a loving hind and a graceful doe, let her breast satisfy you at all times. There should be a good physical relationship between the husband and wife. And he said, that's blessed within that relationship. That should not be withheld on either side, and it should be there. And then in verse 20, he asks a question. He says, why, my son, be exhilarated with an adulteress and embrace the bosom of a foreigner? The ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord. He watches all your paths. He sees what you're doing. And so for the men, you realize that even if you're not caught, that God sees your ways. His own iniquities will capture the wicked, and he will be held with the cords of his sin. It will wrap you up and it'll hold you. And in the greatness of your folly, you're going to go astray. He doesn't leave the topic. Go over to chapter 6. In chapter 6, he becomes even more blunt, I would say, on this. Verses 23 through 35, he comes back to the subject. And that tells me that Solomon is well aware that this is a struggle and that this is something that men have struggled with, do struggle with, and will struggle with. And so this is a topic that is current regardless of what time period you're living in. And you can find it all the way through the Bible. So go to verse 23, and let's get another reader, 23 through 35. Daryl, do you have it?
For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. To keep thee from the evil woman, from the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. Lust not after her beauty in thine heart, neither let her take thee with her eyelids. For by means of a whorish woman a man is brought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. Can a man take fire in his bosom, and his clothes not be burned? Can one go upon hot coals, and his feet not be burned? So he that goeth into his neighbor's wife, whosoever toucheth her shall not be innocent. Men, do not despise a thief if he steal to satisfy his soul when he is hungry. But if he be found, he shall restore sevenfold. He shall give all the substance of his house. But whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. He that doeth it destroyeth his own soul. A woman in dishonor shall he get, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. For jealousy is the rage of a man, therefore he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will not regard any ransom, neither will he rest content, thought, though he now give us many gifts.
Okay. There's a lot in there, but I want you to look at a couple of specific things in here. He comes to this and he says, okay, I'm back to this subject. And if you look at verse 25, here's really the issue that men may struggle with. Lust not, desire not. And King James says, lust not after her beauty in your heart. Desire not her beauty in your heart. Nor let her capture you with her eyelids. What do you think of when it's capture you with her eyelids? How does somebody capture you with their eyelids? Oh, there you go, yeah. Yeah, giving you that seductive look. And there's a lot in here just about how you present yourself and how people can non-verbally present themselves. You don't have to say things to imply things. You don't have to say things to communicate things. And he says, men, you have to make it a principle. Do not desire her beauty in your heart. For on account of a harlot, one's reduced to a loaf of bread. Why a loaf of bread? What do you know about the culture and a loaf of bread? Is that a rich man or a poor man? It's poor. If you were on bread and water, you're down to you've been stripped of everything. And that's what he's talking about. On the account of a harlot, one is reduced to a loaf of bread, down to nothing. She'll take everything away from you. You'll lose everything by making this decision. And then here's a statement that's scary. And an adulteress hunts for any old person. No, an adulteress hunts for the precious life. The one who is really special. And then he gives some illustrations there, and as he goes toward the end of this, he said, you will not go unpunished if you're caught in this. And he said, you know, when people steal to satisfy their hunger, people understand that, but even if he's found, he has to restore sevenfold. And then he says, but let me tell you, when a man commits adultery with a woman, you're lacking sense. You don't understand something. Well, what do you mean I don't understand something? Wounds and disgrace will he find, and his reproach will not be blotted out. Jealousy enrages a man. When you take another man's wife, there's jealousy, and the day of vengeance will come. And then he makes this last statement, he will not accept any ransom, nor will he be satisfied though you give many gifts. You know, if you steal something and you're caught, he said you have to restore sevenfold. In other words, though you stole it, you can return what you stole and the penalty for it. And so if you steal $10 and they catch you, you have to give the $10 back and 7 times that. So you have to give 70 back. He's gotten back what you stole. What about in the case of adultery? You can't make restitution. You can never give back what you took. And he said, you have to realize how special that physical relationship is. And when you enter into that, you have stolen something that can never be given back again. And he said, the man who doesn't understand this, he's going to make some really poor decisions. And so, number one, a man has to realize that he has to be very careful in a physical relationship. And Solomon emphasizes that. He says, guys, be extremely careful in this area. All right, let's look at the second one. Another thing that Solomon notes is, he said, you know, a man who is really going to understand the relationship is going to be appreciative and offer praise to his wife. Let me get some help here. Proverbs 12:4. Who can get that one for us? Proverbs 12:4. All right, Darcy, and Proverbs 18:22. Proverbs 18:22. Who's got that one? All right. And let me go on ahead to Proverbs 19:14. All right, Ron? And I think the others will pull up together. All right, Proverbs 12:4. Darcy?
A virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, but she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in his bones.
All right. So, an excellent wife is a crown of her husband. Boy, a man who's got a good wife, that's a crown. That makes you a king. You better realize that that is important. I love Proverbs 18:22. Did you have that one? Okay.
Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favor of the Lord.
Yeah, I love this verse. He who finds a wife finds a good thing. I don't know about thing. A good lady. And obtains favor from the Lord. The fact that you have a wife, that's good. And the fact that He's given you a wife, that's the Lord's favor to you. And so don't take that for granted. Proverbs 19:14. Ron?
Health and riches are the inheritance of fathers, and a prudent wife is from the Lord.
Yeah, here he says, understand that you can get money, you can get a house from your parents, you can inherit these things, but wow, a prudent wife, a wife who really knows how to do things and is one that you can talk to and enjoy, a prudent wife, that's a gift from God. And he says you need to recognize that, and you need to be appreciative of that. Let me have everybody turn to Proverbs 31. We often think of Proverbs 31 as just something that's written for ladies, but there are actually a couple of things in here that are not just for ladies. Proverbs 31, look at verse 10. Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 12. Verse 10 says, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life." Now stay there in Proverbs 31. We're going to read some more. But look what he said. You know, an excellent wife, man, if you've found that, her price is far above jewels. No jewels would replace that. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain, because she is a prudent wife, and she's an excellent wife. Go on in this to verses 28 and 29. Verses 28 and 29, it says, "Her children arise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her." And it's actually should be, he praises her, saying, "Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all." Here again, he says the children rise up and call her blessed, but the husband also, he praises her. He shows appreciation for her. He doesn't take her for granted. He actually stands up and he says, "Many daughters have done nobly, but you've excelled them all." And there's praise coming out for this wife. And this is what Solomon is saying. He says, I want you to understand that there's appreciation and praise as a result of knowing that God has given you a wonderful wife. And you should recognize that. Let me put one more up here, and I'm just going to put the verses up on the board. He invests in his children. And so you see, here's a man who protects the integrity of his marriage, a man who appreciates his marriage, and then a man who appreciates his family. He said he invests in his children. I told you this verse would come up again, but we started in chapter 1, and we finished with verse 8. But you have to love the fact that Solomon took the time, and here's the king with a lot of things to do, and yet he sits down and he says, "Bring my scribe in because we need to write some things down for my children." And he says, "Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and don't forsake your mother's teaching. Indeed, they are a graceful wreath to your head and ornaments about your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. Consent thou not." Here's a man who says, I'm going to instruct my children. I'm going to invest in them. In his case, he was actually going to write a book for them. He was going to write these things down. You move forward in Proverbs, and Proverbs 17:6 says, "Grandchildren are the crown of old men, and the glory of sons is their fathers." Proverbs, I stopped there. There are other verses that talk about how important the relationship is between fathers and their children, and that you've invested in them. And you have to realize that you lose nothing. You gain everything by pouring your life into the family that God has given you, making sure that they understand what it is to live wisely and live in the fear of the Lord. There is nothing that you will do that will be more important than teaching Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And Solomon recognized that. I think as he got to the end of his life, he recognized that more than ever. And so he wrote these things down so that his children would know them. And so here's just a smattering of Proverbs for men and husbands. But if we could get just these, it would give us some grounding in the marriage that would allow us to flourish in the relationships that we have. All right, let's go ahead and pray, and then we're going to have a prayer sheet. And if you have any questions, comments, or notations, I always like to hear those. Lord, we are thankful for the time, and we pray that you'll help us to benefit from it. Lord, we have some wonderful men at our church, and yet I am well aware that the adulteress hunts for the precious life. And so I pray that you'll help us to be vigilant. Lord, protect us and help us to focus our attention on you so that we do not get drawn away into things that will be destructive. And Lord, help us to focus the attention of our family on you as well. In Jesus' name, amen. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. and I'm hoping that this video will be worth 1,000 words on this webpage. Hi, I'm Pastor Wright from Keystone Baptist Church. Thank you for taking the time to visit our website today. Unfortunately, words on a page can only do so much to give you a feel for a church. There's no substitute for actually visiting. You probably already know that. But sometimes walking into a strange place with people you don't know is a little intimidating. That's why we've created this video. I want to give you a visual tour of what to expect when you're our guest here at church. When you arrive at the church, you can park in either the front or the back parking lot, but you'll probably end up parking in the back parking lot because there are more spaces here. From that parking lot, look for the wide sidewalk that'll lead you into the west wing. The west wing doors will take you into a hallway that'll take you to the foyer, and in that foyer is an information desk. There'll be somebody at that information desk that can help you get your children to Sunday school, the nursery, or wherever else you need. Don't forget, anytime during the process of coming in, our church family will be happy to help you. Just ask somebody. They'll point you in the right direction. Families are always concerned about the care for their children. When you arrive here at the information desk, one of our church members will either be behind this desk or right outside the desk. They'll help you get to the right place. On Wednesday night, we have our Patch Club, Keystone Kids, and Royalty Club. Those young people will go to the different areas, and then the adults will be here in the auditorium for the Bible study. Now, for those of you who have young children, our nursery is down the hallway on the east wing. As you go down that hallway, you'll find that there are two doors. If you go to the last door, there's a procedure for picking up and dropping off your child. When you pick up and drop off your child, our nursery workers will give you some information and they'll answer your questions for you. Those workers rotate from service to service under the direction of Mrs. Skidmore. Now, I know, because I'm the father of 3 children, that the last thing you want to hear is your child crying when you leave. But that's a normal thing. When you leave the nursery, you'll be given one of these. It is a parent pass, and it's a pager. If our staff cannot get your child settled down, or if they need you during the service for any reason, they can page you anywhere in our building. Rest assured, making your children feel comfortable is one of our highest priorities. Our Sunday morning service begins at 10 o'clock with traditional hymns, Bible reading, prayer, and then a Bible-based message. When I get up to begin the message, I will dismiss those who are 3 years old through the 3rd grade to go to our junior church program. They'll go out the auditorium and into the foyer. Our workers will meet them there and take them to their classrooms. The service begins at 10 o'clock, and it'll go to between 11:15 and 11:30. When the service is over, the junior church workers will bring the young people back up and bring them directly to you. The same thing is true for Sunday night, except Sunday nights there is no junior church, and our young people sit in the church service with their families. There's a lot more that I would like to show you, but we're about out of time. We'll put some more clips at the end of this video if you have time to watch them. But you've seen the basic layout of our church and the services. I'll be happy to give you a longer tour in person. Thanks again for visiting our website. I look forward to visiting with you in person. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I'm hoping that this video will be worth 1,000 words on this webpage. Hi, I'm Pastor Wright from Keystone Baptist Church. Thank you for taking the time to visit our website today. Unfortunately, words on a page can only do so much to give you a feel for a church. There's no substitute for actually visiting. You probably already know that. But sometimes walking into a strange place with people you don't know is a little intimidating. That's why we've created this video. I want to give you a visual tour of what to expect when you're our guest here at church. When you arrive at the church, you can park in either the front or the back parking lot, but you'll probably end up parking in the back parking lot because there are more spaces here. From that parking lot,